Well, first, just tell me about like the inception of the 10th Amendment Center. What got you
Oh, shit.
into the activism, and then what made you want to focus specifically on the 10th Amendment?
Well, I'm a former Trotskyite who was an anti-war activist here in LA from day one of the bombs dropping. I used to actually do. I've never voted, and I always thought like everything was kind of gross. I looked at these things, and as I was growing up, I'm like, man, these people are just awful. And for me, war and imperialism just felt like a bad thing naturally, even though I went to government schools and was taught over and over and over that war meant you're bombing people to freedom, right? And I started doing some activism regarding some things in the Middle East. I was helping volunteer for an organization called Al-Awda. It's a right to return Palestinian, pro-Palestinian organization. I wasn't into the kind of imperial foreign policy over there, but really what got me wanting to do something other than just kind of being only out on the fringes was the bombs falling in Iraq in 2003. And that's when I was like, man, I gotta just get more engaged. So I started doing a lot of activism with California Peace Action. I was out in the streets when there were, when there used to be anti-war protests of 10, 15,000, 20,000 people on Hollywood Boulevard, or here where I live in downtown LA. I mean, that happened in New York City. It happened all around the world. Unfortunately, those protests were gone as soon as George W. Bush left, as if war only matters when a Republican kills people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was that kind of experience, because I started the organization in 2006, and really I started it just as a blog. I was like, holy crap, all these so-called like constitutional conservative types. And I really kind of hate that phrase. I guess it's kind of like how libertarians and the one true Scotsman issue, like they hate it when people call themselves libertarian, but they're really horrible, like on the drug war, for example, or on police issues, or like, how can you be really a libertarian if you're in favor of qualified immunity or asset forfeiture and stuff like that, right? So when I hear constitutional conservatives talk about things like foreign policy, and they're just terrible on it. And when you look at a guy like James Madison, the so-called father of the Constitution, he himself specifically said war is perhaps the greatest threat to liberty, because war gives you armies and debts and taxes, and armies and debts and taxes are the known instruments for putting the many under the domination of the few. And that's kind of probably a paraphrase, but doing my best on that one. And so the idea that people could be constitutionalists and be okay with an aggressive foreign policy, Madison's far from alone. I mean, basically across the spectrum at the time, they were all against the type of foreign policy we have today. I thought that was just absurd. So I'm like, I'm going to just start blogging and talking about how everything that these people do, they're either lying about it, or they're wrong, or they're misrepresenting things. And it doesn't matter which party's in power, government keeps growing no matter what. And so I started this blog back in 2006, 2007. It's kind of caught on a little bit. And I guess you can take note of the attacks that we've had, whether it's from former Bush administration, national security people, someone who represented, the torturers in the Jose Padilla case, went off on us in the Washington Post. We've got a 14-minute segment that Rachel Maddow did on us because, we support nullification, must be neo-Confederate and racist, things like that. So the more that we get attacked and hit by mainstream people, I think the more that we're doing some pretty decent work. Is that the short version?
Shut up and sit down.